Now I'm coming to you from the most dangerous state in the country for pedestrians and cyclists. Oregon needs to aim higher, right? We've got the four most dangerous: Jacksonville, Orlando, Tampa, and my hometown of Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties, right? So the genesis of this discussion was, why is it now that we've got cities, Fort Lauderdale, where I'm at, Portland, a lot of these cities have adopted Vision Zero, but why aren't we making any meaningful difference in the kinds of things we're doing? And this sort of segues back into some work I was working on about a decade ago called safety conscious planning, which was, if we're really going to be serious about addressing traffic safety, not just as a platitude, but as something we really want to achieve, we need to rethink how we integrate that into our planning and design process. And it's something that we as a profession do incredibly poorly. And we're lucky today we have Susan Herbal, who I worked with in some of the stuff I'm going to present today. She's a tremendous resource for this. She's been running workshops around the country for probably a decade, 15 years, getting disparate partners together to figure out how to deal with the kind of stuff that I'm going to be talking about today. So we get to Vision Zero. We all probably know where it comes from if we're in this session. Sweden in 1997 decided that the only acceptable policy goal was 0 deaths and fatalities. And that, certainly on a superficial level, makes a lot of sense. Why would we accept anything less than that? Now, there's some resistance in the transportation community about such an ambitious goal. In Florida, though Fort Lauderdale has this, most of the counties are, well, we're not really going to hit 0, so let's do towards 0 deaths. Let's back up on this a little bit. But one of the things that I want to point out when we look at Sweden, rather than what we're doing here, is Sweden, and in Europe too, this is a national model. This is one where we have much stronger national level governance over our transportation system. We don't have the same breakdown from the federal government to the states, to the metropolitan areas, to the cities. So at the national level, you can introduce a policy like this and see that it's enacted. You can very easily link funding mechanisms towards these kinds of outcomes. They have a second thing that we don't have here, which is an understanding that in urban areas, speed is inherently unsafe. I mean, you go into the design guidance for European countries, and some of the speed limits we regard as acceptable for urban areas, 45 miles on an arterial, are regarded as patently unacceptable. So there's a mindset that's both pro-safety, that recognizes the inherent hazard of an automobile. When you're shooting a 2,000-pound piece of metal through a street where there are people, right? It's inherently unsafe in those conditions, right? They understand that. So they're coming from a different context. In the United States, it's quite different. This has emerged not from the national level. There are good folks with groups like Federal Highway Administration who are sensitive to this stuff. It's not occurring even from the regional level. It's occurring at the level of the individual city. The places where we see, and this is a little dated now, the places where Vision Zero policies are being adopted are not by MPOs, not by state governments, but by individual cities, which have a unique perspective on these types of issues. Unlike in, say, Sweden or Denmark, right, or Western Europe, right, these aren't regarded so much as safety measures as what I'm going to argue today is really livability measures. When we adopted traffic calming in the United States, they weren't regarded so much as safety measures as they were livability measures. We're going to tame speeds in our street to make it more comfortable and pleasant for our children. And Vision Zero is kind of the same thing here. And you can look at Portland's policy. I pulled this up. And this is exactly how we do it. We have things like provide safe streets for everyone. Right? What this really is another way of rephrasing the complete streets metric, which is Vision Zero has become another way of promoting pedestrian and bicycle facilities. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'd probably get lynched in this our group if I suggested that, right? Right? This is Portland, right? But the point is that when we look at what our transportation safety problems are, peds and bikes are only an incredibly small part of it. So this is, again, Portland's, its most recent safety report. Your injuries from peds and bikes account for maybe 10% of the total ones that occur on your system. So as much as we may care about the most vulnerable users, the reality of the matter is that the bulk of your injuries, the bulk of your fatalities are still occurring in motor vehicles. And the point I want to make about this is not that we should diminish the role of peds and bikes, but in the Vision Zero discussions that we're hearing in the United States that I go around and talk to folks, it's always about ped and bikes and not about the real thing that we're after, which is enhancing the safety for everyone. Right? If you're only focusing on 10, 20% of the crashes, you're missing a lot of opportunities for enhancing safety. It also puts you guys at a significant disadvantage here because you look like you're advocating from a specific modal perspective. What we need are champions for the issue of safety. Right? We need champions that are looking to save lives in every way possible. And for you guys who are modal advocates, who like walking, who like biking, this is actually a place where you can claim the high ground. Because as it turns out, much of the stuff that enhances the safety for pedestrians and cyclists in urban environments also enhances the safety of motorists. A bunch of my research, and this is one of the first times I'm not going to throw statistics and regressions out and a talk, but a lot of my research has looked at, if we start putting in these ped bike improvements, how does it address safety for other users? As it turns out, when we do make things safer for our most sensitive users, we can enhance safety for everyone. However, that's only a small portion of your problem. That solves your problem of your inner city. It doesn't necessarily address the problem of your suburban arterials, of your freeways, of your off-ramps, these places that have a lot of problems. And I want to, I'm pulling some information from this. This is the document that we worked on, I guess it was published about 10 years ago, incorporating safety into long-range transportation planning. It was an NCHRP report. I believe the number was 546. And it'll cover a lot of the stuff that I'm showing today, because I think the things that we were trying to tackle 10 years ago with addressing safety more broadly are extremely relevant to the Vision Zero problems that you guys are encountering today. All right? So the first thing to think about is, how do we address safety in the transportation planning process? Now and this is, you guys will probably be familiar with this, we establish a vision. We articulate that in terms of goals and objectives. These are broken down into performance measures, where we figure out how we achieve those things. We evaluate the different strategies we examine to select a project. We program it, or provide funding for it in the Transportation Improvement Program, develop project concepts, design it, and then evaluate it over time. Right? This is the basic process. But the reality of what we do is this. Just about every metropolitan area in the country says, we want to establish a safe and efficient transportation system. Right? It almost never gets translated into specific goals and objectives. Right? If it is we'll provide safety for all users. It's very rarely broken down into performance metrics, because the presumption is that by providing a transportation improvement, right, that's the term we use, and following our current guidelines, we've inherently made things more safe. But as those of us who work in urban areas know, that that's just not true. And in fact, do any of you know Gary Toth? He's with Project for Public Spaces now. Right? He used to be the design engineer for New Jersey Department of Transportation. Right? And where this guy got religion was, he was looking at, when he became head of New Jersey's design division, he was looking at their safety projects. He was like, well, we're spending money on these safety projects. How are they performing? And it turns out 8 out of 10 of them were resulting in an increase in traffic-related deaths and injuries. Not only didn't they help, they were hurting things. Right? By making things more safe, more people were getting injured and killed. And that forced about a fundamental rethinking about the way New Jersey DOT approached its planning and design process. So what I want to do here is break through this process to show you guys the inputs that you ought to be bringing in. Don't just focus on the city. This should be embedded in the entire planning and design process at the metropolitan level, from your counties, from your cities on down. Try to yoke them all into this process, and they should be. That's why we do comprehensive planning. Right? Try to bring all these inputs in so you can actually achieve what you want. So vision, motherhood, apple pie, safe and efficient transportation system. That's great stuff, right? We all want that. We need to break that down more finely. What do we mean? Do we mean a certain reduction in deaths and injuries? What kind of goals are we trying to get? Vision Zero establishes that for us. When we say we want to eliminate traffic-related deaths and injuries, we've established a vision statement. Now, how do we get there? Right? Well, the key thing that we do very, very poorly is measure it. Right? Most metropolitan areas, if they look at these things at all, will simply say, how has our total death and injury rate evolved over time? There's no real evaluation of how different design alternatives in the regional planning process may affect safety outcomes. Right? So let's say we're projecting arterial improvements in the suburban areas. How is that going to affect traffic-related death and injury? We don't know. We make the assumption that by following our design guidelines, we're going to enhance safety. Right? But there's increasingly, we've been developing tools that are going to let you do this, that'll let you forecast traffic-related death and injury. And Rebecca will talk about some of this stuff they're doing in Seattle later. But something I did for San Antonio, which is, let's look at the same way when we do our regional planning, we do our regional models, we look at traffic analysis zones. Let's break down in our different development scenarios how traffic-related deaths and injuries are going to be changed is a result of the different design scenarios we have. So by adding arterials, widening lanes, changing land use configurations, what would we expect the changes in traffic-related deaths and injury to be, right? And so this is the kind of inputs we have in these things that data you guys have, right? Your GIS people can crunch this. Freeway miles, arterial miles, the types of land uses that are going in, density, right? We can see on a base scenario, this thing would have 5 pedestrian crashes a year, 311 multiple vehicle crashes, and 1 cyclist crash. The point I want to make is, by changing these design values, how many strip commercial uses are we going to have? How's the density going to be? We can predict with relative accuracy what that traffic fatality rate is going to be, what the injuries are going to be, how many crashes we would expect to have. That allows you to evaluate on the basis of safety how your projects are going to perform. On the land use side, we've begun to quantify, well, take a step back, we've begun to quantify the costs of crashes. AAA has done this because they want to quantify that. It turns out the costs of crashes in a metropolitan area are far higher than the cost of congestion. We start calculating the damage to property, injuries to lives, and the like. This, if we want to take it to the next step, can provide the basis for doing traffic impact analysis. We already do these things for new developments and urban areas. We want to figure out what the congestion impact is going to be and levy a fee on the developer to mitigate those costs. If you start quantifying safety in the same terms, you can apply that as well. And here's the kind of thing you can start doing. You can start promoting socially desirable land development outcomes on the basis of safety. So we know, and this is San Antonio data again, that the placement of a big box store in a community is going to result in an increase in traffic-related crashes, injuries, and deaths, right? Now we can quantify that. So we start adjusting the model, and this traffic analysis zone, what happens? It's got 447 crashes. We put in a big box store, it's going to be 486, right? Net change of 39. We quantify that based on its dollar value, and for a large urban area, this is going to produce a social negative impact of $61,000 per year, each year, right? This becomes a rational basis for traffic impact fees, right? Just as we do for congestion. Now the flip side is, what we're learning is that a lot of these socially desirable pedestrian bike stuff that we love so much here in Portland enhances safety, right? So here, same thing, baseline of 447. We've analyzed how more compact development is going to perform. What happens if we change the configuration of the big box into a more walkable environment? Well, we go from 447 crashes to 402, right? A reduction in 45 crashes, which, is a net reduction in $71,000 in costs, right? What you've got is the basis for an impact fee abatement, right? Plus and minus, winners and losers, right? This is a way to encourage people to do the socially desirable things you want and to do it on the basis of safety. All right. The next is project evaluation and programming. So we've gone through and we've evaluated individual projects. We're looking at how we're going to change our lanes, we're going to put in transit. Now we've got to actually program these things. 2 minutes, okay. I've been rambling. All right, now we got to actually program these things. We got to allocate funding. This is really where the game is played. You know, most certainly in the Southeast, we do our long-range plan, it's done, we've met our requirements, we shelve it, and all the action comes at the funding level. People come in with their projects, they engage in political horse trading. This is where the game is played, right? If you want to level the playing field on that, you can do like Denver does. Denver puts in specific criteria for evaluating the safety impacts of specific projects, right? Congestion's evaluated, other factors are evaluated, but safety is brought in as an explicit factor, so a project can be promoted if it includes concrete safety benefits, right? The project development process, right? This is where we're actually designing the stuff. This is where in Vision Zero, most of our attention is paid. We're going to do a project, we're going to design the thing, right? Are we going to provide the facilities for pedestrians and bicyclists? Now, we've gotten a lot of guidance from folk. NACTO, I think, is doing the best work on this right now. A lot of guidance on alternate street design, right? So NACTO, and I'm working with them now on this, they've gotten pretty good recommendations on how to convert streets into more walkable, bikeable, livable forms. But the challenge is, how do we estimate the safety effects on this? And the reality is we don't have the data we need just yet to fully quantify the benefits of these things. But we're working on it. Right, and this is, I won't belabor this one too much, but this is a model for how we're going to do that. There are 3 mediating factors that influence traffic-related death and injury. More traffic volumes equals more opportunity for crashes. Conflicts between users, be they cars and cars, pedestrians and bikes, right? That happens quite a bit. Bikes and cars and the like. How are conflicts created by the design of the environment? And then those speeds, right? And speed being related both to crash severity, which is the more severe, the higher the impact speed, the more severe the crash, but also crash frequency. Because the faster a car is going, the longer it's going to take it to stop. If there are conflicts, that speed's going to make that crash more likely to occur, right? So these feed into crash frequency and severity. The connect-in, where we're working, is on this side. Let's look at how street design impacts volumes, impacts conflicts, impacts speeds, right? Let's quantify that concretely. And then next, this is, if we will, the next frontier. That seems to be the word for today. Right, the development patterns that inform the appropriate street design. The big effort in the street design manuals now is figuring out the appropriate design for a specific developmental context. We need to know where that street is going in order to design it right. That also influences directly all of these other things. You know, so Wes Marshall and Norman Garrick did a study not too long ago that looks at holding everything else constant. You just bring buildings up to the street and speeds go down, right? Conflicts can go down by things by the mitigation of driveways, changes in the roadside environment, and volumes as well, right? So let's figure out on this development side, when we start doing our manuals, how these things feed into this model and translate on an evidence basis, not just on a we're pulling it out of our rear end and making it up as we go basis, into crash frequency and severity. All right? So monitor these things over time. If we're successful in our efforts, we should see over time a reduction in traffic-related deaths and injury. And that's where I'll stop it. Now, the one thing I wanted to add for Portland, Fort Lauderdale's hitting this too, where they're scared, right? They've adopted Vision Zero, and oh my God, crashes have gone up, right? We have more crashes this year than we had last one, and Fort Lauderdale's scrambling to figure out how they're going to present that, right? But the reality is they're on top of the problem, right? You're asking the right questions. You're, if you will, getting ahead of the wave. Right? It takes some time to get these things off the ground, and hopefully the fear that's generated by that, because you're bringing attention to it, and that's what you want to do to get change. You've now got attention to safety. Use that attention to start translating it into a more effective program on the ground. Crashes are going up. We're on top of this. This is the kind of stuff we need to start doing, and feed into this process, right? Feed into this process. Not just the vision, that's nice to do, and not just at the project, but in the evaluation and programming as well. Then you've got the ability to push it through. All right? Okay. Thank you. We're going to do one or two questions. So if anybody just has, like, most of the questions we'll do at the end. We want to save time for that. But are there any elaborating questions before I hand it over to Rebecca? Yeah.
It's not a question, Eric, but I would point out that 546 has been updated. The new one is 866.
There we go.
Just got published.
Okay, haven't seen it yet. Awesome. All right.
I have a question. So there's I really am intrigued by this idea of using safety as your basis for system development charges. There's a Floridian concept, of course, that we in the Northwest have imported, at least Washington has, transportation concurrency, which is typically thought to mean the capacity of your transportation system must be concurrent with any new development or any changes that come in. Have you thought at all about what a safety-based concurrency kind of rule might look like, and if that's something?
Well, to take a step back, so if you guys don't know, so concurrency, it's also called adequate public facilities. The idea is that if you're going to put into development an environment that's over capacity, the developer has to provide capacity or pay for the charges of that to do a new development. And I guess the same thing, if we're going to do that, I hadn't thought about it like that, but the traffic impact analysis thing would work exactly the same way, where if you've got a baseline traffic fatality or traffic injury or traffic crash level for a development, you look at how some alternate to the street design, to the land use, how that's going to change that, and then you just assess an impact fee on top of that. Exact same way. Yeah. Okay? All right, thank you.